Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Coffee with Derek and Craig. I'm gonna do a little something a little bit different this morning. I don't know how we're gonna get all this stuff in, so it may be a long show. I'm going to talk about settings, sites, and situations, tips, that kind of thing with metal detecting. We did the show last night, and Gavin, came up with that. He likes to hear about that kind of stuff. So, and Scotty D, Craig, I'm trying to place the face with the name, and I know Scotty because he's been on before, but he had a lot of, he was bringing up some topics about metal detecting stuff that he was doing, dealing with the atmosphere, and humidity and stuff like that. And it does, and Craig and I have found this, out, or I have definitely, that moisture in the ground. It doesn't sound like it would really mess with metal detectors, but in a lot of cases, it used to be, 10, 15 years ago. Well, even nowadays, that the water, the moisture in the ground after a good rainstorm or something versus extremely dry or arid ground, your detector seems like it works better. It conducts almost the signal is conducted by the moisture in the ground, and this played a big factor with the Bliss tool. And I learned this early on, that you cannot run your normal hunting settings in a situation like that because the signal is already so powerful, the machine itself, that if you ran it in your normal hunting settings, like we're just going to say gain of 2, RX gain, whatever you want, sensitivity, run your sensitivity, higher to get deeper in the ground, that does not work as good in the wet ground. It almost makes your machine unstable, noisy, falsing, and you had to turn down your machine. Whereas, and I'm just using it as an example, like an AT Pro or a MXT from White's or whatever. In the same situation, it actually seem like your detector with your normal hunting settings would work better. These newer machines, they don't, they're just so doggone powerful, which is good, don't get me wrong, but you can't pump the power to these machines or the sensitivity in those situations because of the moisture in the ground. And it may be from the rain or, humidity outside. I don't know if the atmospheric, as far as humidity, really has any real bearing on the actual operation of a metal detector, because it is, you're going down into the ground, not above the ground. Air test,
Yeah,
whatever. I don't think it factors in. It could. I mean, we're finding out more and more that EMI and Wi-Fi signals, Bluetooth signals, whatever, they do mess with metal detectors, even if they are subtle. Uh, you don't, you may not notice it, but Craig and I have had situations where, well, Craig, I want to bring up the CWPPO hunt that we went up to in Ohio in 2016 or 17, where you were hunting around that house, and then everybody, the
hmm
tavern, and everybody came around. I came over there too, and there was like 30 hunters in this, I don't know, a couple hundred feet, and they were finding
yeah. Well,
stuff. But go ahead, sorry.
everybody was. Well, it was funny. We were down by the river, and I realized that we weren't going to find anything because it was silted in, and so I kept looking up the hill and toward that tavern, and that tavern just looked, when you see that place and you're a metal detector, that thing's calling you. You just
Mm-hmm.
think, man, that thing's got some history around it. And I got up there and I went right to this one area. When I was looking at it, I thought there's one little place there. It was like a high above the road. And I thought if you're right on that one little corner, you can see both ways down the road, and that's where people would probably have been. This thing went back to 1822, I believe, and I thought, there was a lot of wagons going up and down this road probably, and people would probably get up on this thing to look down to see if the wagons are coming.
Right.
And that's where they would have probably dropped stuff. And right off the bat, I found an Indian head and that turquoise ring. But, it's like as soon as people, there was like, 150 people hunting, and, it was like, it wasn't a huge area, and within probably an hour, most of that backyard was just, had been hunted out almost. And but people, saw me digging, and because it was a wide open area, and I got swarmed, and a lot of people were coming up to me asking me, I was showing people what I just found, and the EMI was just, after there was about 20 or 30 machines within an area that's about like a small backyard almost, it's just, it overwhelms you.
Well, yeah, that's what I was noticing with the machines is that even though we weren't hearing it, I think there were some Deuses. I mean, there was every kind of machine you probably could think of in there, it seemed like. But, Craig and I were not having any problems with EMI. I don't think that some of the guys with the Deuses weren't. I think there was a couple CTXs in there. I don't know how much problem they were having with the signals going around, but I definitely noticed when all those people got together, even though our machines weren't acting up, the fines went down. Nobody was digging. Everybody was just detecting. Nobody was really digging any holes.
Yeah.
They were digging marginal signals. But then when it cleared out, all of a sudden Craig started finding stuff again. And, what's his name?
Like
Evan was using, Evan Creedy was using a Deus, I think, at the time. And he started finding stuff. Right. I mean, we're talking 2 and 3 inches down in the ground. Not anything major. It was like I think it was a mercury dime. Stuff like that. But as soon as those people came back, everybody came back, it was messing with the performance of the detectors. I'm almost positive of it. It was crazy. But you weren't hearing it.
I was back there the next day, late in the afternoon, and most people were out. They'd given up and were talking and stuff. And I went around the back of that house, where I'd hunted before, and I dug a silver-plated spoon that was down over a foot deep. It was like way down. I got a brass ring that was probably 1850, 1860 wedding band.
Right.
They couldn't afford silver or gold back then, so they'd have these. I found them, a lot of them in, not a lot, but I found them in same kind of rings in Civil War camps. And they were basically a men's wedding band, probably. But, I found, some, stuff like that. I was finding targets, deep in the ground because it just, there wasn't any interference.
Right.
But it's like with the water. I've been in situations with the Bliss tool. I was in Stafford one time, and it rained so hard that after it stopped, the ground was just steaming. It was hot. Well, it was not real hot, but probably in the 80s, and it was like you could see the humidity in the air, and there was like almost standing water on the ground, and there was no way you could hunt. You couldn't calm the machine down. And one of the guys that had a Bliss tool, he was all upset about it, saying, this is ridiculous, that this machine can't work in this condition. And I said, I've been in conditions where I've had the Nautilus and I've had the Explorer in conditions like that where I couldn't hunt.
Right.
I remember the Explorer, it was going off on the water, and that machine, if the ground was damp, it was great, but when it was oversaturated, it's like it hits a wall of water. It's just bouncing the signal off of it. It's what it's doing. And there's sometimes you just can't hunt. I mean, you just got to wait till it, the water disappears a bit.
Well, the biggest thing too, Craig, a lot of people don't, they understand about gain or sensitivity, and that's the first thing I, tell the guys. I say, when you're in that situation, the first thing you do is turn down that gain down almost to zero. You turn your frequency down to normal mode, not turbo mode. This is on the Bliss tool. You got to rein back the power, because you remember, you want it stable. You want a stable machine, and if you do not have a stable machine, it's not going to work right. It doesn't matter which machine you're using. You want it, Equinox or whatever, you got to have it stable to get the best performance out of it. And when you're dealing with a water situation, like when Sam and Evan did that test with the Equinox, and the Equinox Bliss tool, Technetics, T2, and then I think it was a Deus, and they made a test garden. And it was a really good video, but it rained like hell, and it made the water. It was just so saturated. It was sopping when they were walking, trying to do the test. And as I watched it, I'm thinking to myself, man, I know my detector would hit a lot of those targets, and I know that the T2 should have. And then, the Equinox did really good. They were new with the machine. They were using presets and everything. And it was just the ground was waterlogged. And I think using normal settings, the normal hunting settings, it was killing the power of several detectors.
Also, they just gotten the Equinox too.
Oh yeah.
They weren't real familiar with it, but yeah, it's.
Well, they were using presets, is what we would have done too. I mean, you don't know a machine. You got
back in the old days. I never had that problem with the old machines, you know, because they wouldn't go, but 5 inches anyway on a dime.
Right, it actually improved. Yeah, it actually improved your chances.
So we used to love to go out, I used to love to go out with the Tesoro or some of the Whites machines, and it would enhance it, and sometimes the meter would read up. I don't know if you ever had that.
Yeah.
When the ground's real wet, like a wheat penny would read like almost like a silver dime, or a regular penny would read,
swing higher.
Yeah.
And that happened with the Whites a lot, with MXT and with the Spectre V3. And I used to love when it rained the night before, and I know I'm going out detecting in the morning. I'm like, oh, this is going to be a good day, to get all excited. And it still happens like that. I mean, there's a lot of people. These are good machines, don't get me wrong. It just, a lot of people still use them. They're good. I like White's brand and have used them a lot in the past and everything. It's just the newer ones seem, well, they're different technology, different, things are upgraded, but you may find a time where your settings that you use, well, even Craig knows. I mean, if he starts having an erratic, the Equinox starts getting erratic or whatever because of dry ground, or, a dry ground, it's harder. I think it was harder, well, definitely harder for a lot of detectors to work in very arid, dry, hard ground. And that's what impressed me about the Ballisto when it came out in 2012, was we had that one guy from Tennessee, and he's digging, 3-ringers and stuff at 12 inches down in this hard, dry ground. We hadn't had any rain, and it even shocked him because it has the opposite effect. It can't penetrate that way. It's just strange the way it works, and I don't know the technical reason why, other than, it's just soil moisture, and it affects, even when I was doing depth tests and stuff, I knew that was a factor. Down here in Florida, I don't deal with it quite as much as you guys do up north, because we have a sandy soil and water drains off a little faster. But on the beach, running your, I had to run my gain at 0 on the wet salt sand, and that plays hell with a lot of detectors. But now they're starting to make these programs. The Equinox has them, the Deus has them, the Quest, that these machines run better on wet salt sand, where it's notoriously hard for VLFs, a lot of them, to even work in that environment. And I'm doing stuff that you wouldn't even, as a detectorist, knowing your metal tech, you wouldn't even try the settings that I was running, and it took me a little while to figure them out. But I'm actually running 0 ground balance. There's not very many times that I ever do that in the in the woods, in the fields, or anything like that. But for whatever reason, running 0 ground balance, I'm still digging quarters, deeper than 14 inches. I can't even get them out of the wet salt sand before the hole collapses. And, I think the only way we did that, I kept on thinking I was getting falsing, Craig. And I had I think Tom Jones was with me down there in Clearwater Beach. And I'm like, man, this happened 2 or 3 times. And I'm like, Tom, come here. He's like, he comes over, and I said, man, when I get to the next signal, I'm going to dig like crazy. And I want you to, if you can, get a couple scoops out of this hole. There's got to be something down here that I'm, the machine is hearing. And, it got a signal, and we started digging, digging down this wet salt sand before the hole collapses. And it turned out to be a quarter, and it was every bit of 14 inches down in this wet salt sand, which is incredible depth, in that environment. But, so I knew that everything I was hearing was a signal. I just couldn't get to it. And I never thought there'd be a time, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we were saying, man, I wish we can get a dime at 10 inches. Man, that'd be awesome, in depth. And the first thing that we figured out when we got the bliss tool in is like the guys are saying, man, I'm so tired of digging deep. And Craig and I would scratch our heads and throw our hands in the air. So first you want a detector that will get deep, and then now you don't want one. So he started joking around that we don't include a backhoe with this machine, because you do get, shoulder deep on some of these targets. I think I did a couple tests with the V3 model. It was like, a silver dollar at 30 inches. I mean, yeah, you're not going to typically, you may not find stuff that deep, but it was just the idea that it could do it with relatively normal settings. And, like when, we're doing with the Civil War bullets, I think it was 20 some inches, the capability of the machine to do that, even though you may not have targets that deep. It's still detecting that deep, so if there happens to be something real deep, you'll get it. It seems like the Equinox does a pretty good job of that, Craig. I don't know. It seems like you're getting better depth with a machine than a comparable machine in the same environment. Like, well, definitely, you're getting a couple more inches deep, anyways, in the Deus, aren't you?
Oh yeah.
I mean, it just.
I think so. I've been talking to people who are asking me, about the difference between the Deus and the Equinox, and I think the Equinox is a little better, but you have to consider that, the chips in the Deus are, older, whereas the Equinox has got the newer chips in it, which are faster. I mean, it's like for a long time, every year the chips that were coming out were doubling the speed. It's called Moore's Law, but I don't think they're quite doubling, but, they're still getting faster, each generation. It's driven by the cell phones and stuff, but, I think, they got the ORX now, which I'm hearing guys are saying they're going back over the spots. It's not supposed to be as high a, premium machine as the Deus, but it's seeming to pull out stuff. But it's a little more simple, I think, the way the workup is on it. But they got these high frequency coils. Guys are telling me that it's made a big difference, and I can see that because you can. You can run these. I don't know if it's multi-frequency or not on those coils or not, but that's another thing. With the Equinox, you're running multi-frequencies, and mostly with the Deus, you got to switch between 4 frequencies. But
it seems like Minelab's been doing that for a while, Craig. I know they had several machines in the past that work across the spectrum of frequencies at the same time, which is a unique to them, I think.
I had the Explorer XS. I had a pair of them, and I used those for at least, I don't know, 8 or 9 years, and I'd use the Nautilus, and I remember I walked over a signal and I didn't hear with the Nautilus, and my friend Mike dug it was pretty upsetting, it was War of 1812 artillery button with the cannon and eagle on it, and it was about 8. It was like 8 or 9 inches deep, and I just, I don't know why, but the Nautilus wouldn't pick it up. I finally put it on maximum gain, which was totally unstable, and I could hear it. I could get a repeatable signal, but it wasn't a mode that I could hunt in,
Yeah.
And that really upset me, and I was listening to the Explorer, and he just gotten it, within a few months, and I started thinking, man, so he ended up, his Explorer broke, and so he gave it to me, and I said, well, I'll send it back and get it fixed, and I did, and I ended up getting another one, and I had a pair of them, but that machine was, multi-frequency. I can't remember how many frequencies it had, but you could run it, like know, one frequency, or you could run it multi. And I always run it multi, and the it was like kind of like a full tones machine, sort of like you can do with the Deus, with the tone ID. And I love the tone ID. And a lot of people would say, God, how can you hunt with all this, sounds like a synthesizer, And I go, yeah, but it's giving me all kinds of information,
Mm-hmm.
I got so where I could tell a button from a pull tab signal, just by the tone, and then like silver coins, man. When I went over a silver coin, I could almost hear, almost all the time hear the nuance from it. I would say that's a silver coin for sure. I remember one guy says, "How do you know that?" I said, "I could hear it." I said, "You want to watch me dig it?"
Yep.
One time I dug a barber quarter right in front of a guy, and I was thinking it was probably going to be a Washington, but I just said, "Hey, that's a silver coin. I know it."
I was going to say, I just, with the synthesizer kind of sound on those, I just couldn't wrap my mind around them. It wasn't that I couldn't hear the tones. The sound of the beep, so to speak, it drove me crazy. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
It's a preference thing. It's not that,
it's not for everybody, and
it was just too foreign to me. There's been machines in the past that I've really wanted to buy and use, and I just, for whatever reason, the way they sound, and I don't know if it wasn't good to my ears. I couldn't pick out information, or it was annoying to pick out information. And we've talked about this before as far as the sound they make, the particular tone that they use on these machines. I'm not talking MindLab because obviously they have their own deal going on, but is it generic? Not in performance, but it's just whatever that particular sound module or filter or whatever it is on the machine. Is that just something that the company that made that particular device came up with? Is that something that the detector company, is picking out to use that particular tone, the bassiness of it, the treble of it, or is it just a generic, whatever comes with that circuit, so to speak?
I think a lot of it's an oscillator,
Right. Well, yeah. I just didn't know if they'd done a study on it that way to see what's more sensitive to our ears, the pitch of the tone or the bass of the tone, if they've done any studies that way to make it easier for people generally to hear the nuance in it. Or
I don't think they go so much for that. They mostly go for the numbers. Most meter machines, it's numbers.
Right.
And it's like I can hear. I got a signal in my yard a while back that read 3, and it was coming back in every direction. And it just sounded too good to leave in the ground, and it most people wouldn't dig that because it'd be foil, and it turned out to be this little rectangular piece of lead, and it actually looked like it might have been it looked like it had attachments at one time that broke off of it, and it was almost the same size as like a lieutenant bar, one of those little tiny ones, but to me, it sounded like something good, that, and that, even though it was just a piece of lead, it could have been an artifact. It could have, I've dug, I've heard people say don't dig anything below like 11 or 12, on the meter. I've dug buttons at 5. I've dug them at 9, 10. You don't know some of these pewter buttons, especially the little tiny ones that they can read really low.
Right.
I almost think that sometimes the meter keeps you from digging.
It does. I mean, I figured that out when I was using the whites. That I was, I do test gardens, and I have stuff set up for that reason to see if typically if I can dig say a quarter at 12 inches, and what the meter reading was. And when I noticed it going into the negative range, like saying it's iron, I'm like, wow, how many targets have I missed because I looked at that stupid meter? I mean, it's just preference again. But if I was listening to sound and only sound, it changed the way I hunted, and I was finding a lot more stuff. That's why I think there's really no place that is actually hunted out, because so many people run so many different settings and so many different discrimination levels that, like you said, they're not digging anything below 11. You know for a fact that with your machine, the way you have it set up, that a 5 or 6 could be a button. So, they've missed stuff. If there's notoriously stuff there to go back to it,
Like I dug a tomback button in the yard that was as big as a quarter, and it was reading 14, whereas 15 is a nickel on the
right.
Equinox. And it was just sticking. It was only 4.5 inches deep, but there was so much iron around it.
Right.
The other machines just didn't pick it up. And I know, that was, I was surprised when I heard it. I thought, man, that sounds good. And, it's reading below nickel. How many people are going to dig those? And this is the size of a quarter. Just think what a cuff size tomback button is going to read. It's going to be like tinfoil or,
right.
And that's, if you're a relic hunter, a colonial hunter, a Civil War type hunter, these are the kind of signals we dig, because, and also you could dig a gold coin in those ranges.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Which that's on my bucket list. I know several guys, my friend Mike that got me into the hobby, he's dug 2 $1 gold pieces over the years, but he doesn't have a tenth of the silver, and, relics and plates and stuff like that I do. But, it's worth taking a chance, digging, people go, I don't want to dig all this trash. And I go, one of those things could be a gold ring. It could be a gold coin. It could be, who knows, a rare button, like a pewter button, like I've dug these USA Entwine buttons. And one of them I got with a meter machine. The first one I got with the Nautilus. And the Nautilus didn't have a meter. So you have to just, basically listen and dig. And I almost think that with those machines, you're going to dig deeper stuff because you don't, you're not looking at the meter. You're just listening to the signal.
And I've dug, with the whites the same way. Sorry, go ahead, Greg.
Yeah. Well, it's like I dug those. I think those cufflinks that I dug that were King Charles II. It was a weird alloy of lead and brass. Have you ever heard of an alloy of lead and brass?
No, not at all.
It was just an oddball, and their buttons were tiny. And where I got them, these guys had dug like a cellar hole out, and it was just full of iron and stuff. And they dug this whole thing out and just kind of pulled it back and left this huge hole open. And I walked up on this place. It was kind of like down the side of a real steep hill, like dug into the side of the hill. And I started going over the dirt pile, and I started, hearing, there was iron, but I was also getting these little tiny, blips. I started digging button after button. And I remember I got this, I got this little bump that was just above iron. It was, it was discriminating, it was a discriminating sound, but it was so low. It was unbelievable. It was like probably a signal most people wouldn't dig. And it was this there was this little button, and it's pretty cool because it has the royal crown on top, and then underneath it has 2 hearts. And he was called the Merry King because he liked women, and he was giving away estates, to have sex with all these women. So he was his father, Charles I, was beheaded because he started a civil war against his own people.
No, geez.
And so they had Cromwell, and then he ended up being killed, and then Charles II was hiding out in France, so they brought him back as the king. But I didn't even know what these. When I saw this, thing, I thought, man, that almost looks royal with that little crown on it, So I couldn't find any information, so I went on this British site and I posted, pictures of the button. Does anybody know what this is? And about 15 minutes later, this lady said, and she didn't know I was in the United States, and she was going, "Oh, that is a fantastic find, it's a Charles II, and she gave me a link, and so she said something about, where'd you find this, thinking I was in England. I said, I found this in Northern Virginia in the United States. And she's like, what? I said, yeah. I said, this is really intriguing. I said it was a colonial spot for one of the richest guys in Virginia, or in the country at the time. The guy was, he was making $20,000 in silver back in the early 1700s.
Right.
And it was like a mining area. He was doing mining. He was bringing in iron from across the river up Mattawoman Creek and bringing it up Tabasco Creek, and then they had blast furnaces, and he was making pig iron, and they were basically cutting down an acre of woods for every ton of pig iron they were. I think it was a ton. They could make a ton of pig iron, but they needed an acre of firewood to,
to heat it up
to make it.
Yeah.
And eventually they took out like about 20,000 acres of wood. Yeah. But this guy was rich. I mean, this place had some, and when I got in there, it had been hunted for probably 20 years or more. There'd even been gold panning done in that area, but it was so mineralized, and there was so many square nails in the ground. It was just incredible. It's one of those spots where some of the detectors, like some of the early whites, had a whole lot of problem in there. There's just so many nails.
Just so much iron. Yeah, it's like a carpet of nails. Yeah,
there were some places where you could hunt that weren't too mineralized, and then there were some places where the machines, most machines didn't even work. I remember, I took the Explorer on this one side. The first time I went up there, I'd taken a whole bunch of other machines up there and just never found anything. The first time I went up there, I found a cut real. It was I think it was 7 inches deep, and it was, half of a 2 real. And I ended up finding just, those machines were able to deal with the mineralization. I was just digging button after button after button, and they were just 2 and 3 inches deep, a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
It just, it was a rocky kind of ground, and it was just, they'd mined up there and stuff, and the creek was about, it was cut through the rocks, and on one side there was cliffs about 100 feet high, straight up and down. I mean, this creek is, had cut through there, and, it's just nothing but rock. But it was one of the higher areas. You could stand up on the one ridge and look out over 95 and then see the river, a mile and a half away. But, it was just a perfect area. You had a huge creek, you had all this, timber and everything else. It was just a perfect place to start a settlement.
Yeah.
But
we'll take up on this again on Monday, Craig, or maybe we'll do it Saturday night. It's kind of a good topic, just generally speaking. But I like this, the whole story you were just telling there. It just shows the ingenuity and everything, but it also shows our side of it, trying to find this old history and the situations we deal with. This irony nail areas and mineralized ground and stuff. There's a lot of stuff we can touch on. Maybe help like Gavin over there in Australia and stuff. I mean, he deals with mineralized ground. I'm sure there's gold, there's mineralized ground, right? So it
Yeah.
may help him out a little bit because I know I've been in some situations too, and we'll get into that maybe more on Monday, or we may even carry it over tomorrow night's show. That's what I like about these short shows. It gives you all these ideas too to talk about, but you can't get all the information in a half an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, but all right, yeah, we're about 35 after anyway. But go ahead, Craig, if you got something.
It's just starting to rain out here.
Oh, we're not getting
supposed
any.
to get any. Within about 10 hours, we're supposed to have over an inch, but just starting.
Yeah,
Supposed to. It's like it's already gone down to about 70. It was 72 a little while ago.
Yeah, we've been in the 90s and 100 feel like temperatures all week.
They're claiming about noon it's going to be about 64. I was like, God.
I'll take some of that.
Sweater on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy for August.
Yep.
But yesterday was 92 with just, oh man, it was like Africa out here. It was so humid.
Yeah.
It was like, God. I walked over to the post office and it was like soaking wet coming back, just 2 blocks walking.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to today being out in it, but got to do it. But all right, guys, well, we'll wrap up the show for today. Thanks for listening. Be sure to tell a friend and like and follow the show. Be safe, getting to work and all that stuff, or in your travels. And we'll talk to you tomorrow night there at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and just for our regular hardcore metal detecting show. And we never know what we're going to talk about. We just kind of go with the flow, let the show lead where it may. So you guys have a great day. If you can get out there detecting, enjoy it. Keep digging. God bless.